Silver and gold are moving through a historic period. It feels like we're in a new paradigm for precious metals. Today, we have a special guest, Galen McNamara. He's the CEO of SILVER47. So we know he follows the silver price and developments in the precious metal sector very closely. We're going to talk with him about the price of silver, his thoughts on what's been happening here over the last year, what we might expect in the future. And then we're going to move into the silver mining sector and, of course, focus in on his company because there's a lot of exciting developments there. Galen, welcome to Ron's Basement.
Thanks, Ron. Great to be back. You know, the background you have, I think you have the most interesting basement around. So all those things you have back there, I always just laugh, and I'm kind of looking at the teddy bear, and I like that first mint sign. You know, I think that's great. You know, I bought some silver from there, and yeah, interesting.
Yeah, they're good. They I tell you what, they've got some great. Thanks for the plug. They'll appreciate that as well. But they've got some great products. They're all unique, and what's special about them is the silver that they mint comes from First Majestic. So it's literally from the ground to the mint to you. Never gets touched by the COMEX or the LBMA. So
that's right. We can cut those silly middlemen out as much as possible.
Yeah. And speaking of the silly middlemen, the COMEX and the LBMA, the paper markets, seems like the last 6 months have been pretty crazy for the silver price. Any thoughts on what you're seeing out there, just generally speaking, when it comes to silver?
Well, you know what? I think this was like a coiled spring, and we all, people who follow the space, all knew that it was only a matter of time before something like this happened, and we did have, you know, some form of short squeeze, you know, for sure, with all these silver bars flying across the ocean and back. And is there going to be tariffs on silver and all of this thing and all of these things? But like, all of that is great and it matters, but it all just comes back to the supply demand fundamentals. And what is the ratio of paper silver out for physical silver in the vaults? Like, it's a few hundred to one, right? Well, like, whatever it is, you know, that is not sustainable, right? And it's like the emperor isn't wearing any clothes here. So it's just very nice to finally see. And I think, and I hope, just getting started. You know, Keith Neumeyer has, you know, the idea for triple digit silver, and all of a sudden now, you know, that's kind of like nice. Well, that could happen one day, you know, and that's really great. But like, all of a sudden now it's like, now we can see it, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. Yeah.
Well, and like you said, you know, we've got the manipulation in the paper market, but at the same time, we know there's a huge deficit and like growing demand for silver. And and if we segue into the mining sector, right, there's just not like a huge new supply of silver coming online. So it creates a very interesting scenario, especially for a company like yours that happens to have a huge amount of silver in the ground.
Yeah. And you know what, from my perspective as a geologist, you know, we've, as an industry, we've critically underinvested in exploration for a lot of these critical minerals, including silver and also gold and lots of things, you know, not only like globally, but like especially domestically. And I think that's something like that's really important, because this importance of domestic supply of some of these things is like now in the national conversation, you know, which it hasn't been, I don't think, in my lifetime. And, you know, places like the United States have great potential for all of these things. It's just haven't really done exploration in that long. And there has been permitting hurdles that are now starting to, you know, in the current administration, you know, we're starting to see some changes. And you know, we should never shortcut, you know, doing things correctly from an environmental standpoint. But like, it's not a zero-sum game where it's mining or environmental protection. Like, both are possible, you know, and both happen every day in different mines around the world. So, geez, you know, I just come back to the fact that, like, you know, we were 40 years in the desert, you know, as a geologist, you know, since the start of almost the start of my career. And now there's really good interest in continued exploration ongoing. But you can't just be like, you know, we can't just as an industry throw, you know, $1 billion at exploration in year one, like snap, and then all of a sudden we have these discoveries. No, like it's a bit of an art form, and it takes time and it takes effort in a lot of places. So, you know, that's more big picture than my company specific, but it's a process.
But that affects your company. When I think of SILVER47, and of course it was merged with Suma Silver, the previous company that you were CEO of, it feels like to me you have a real big head start, because like you said, right, we were in the desert for 40 years. There just wasn't a lot of money or interest in exploring for silver. I think, you know, people like you, and I'm not trying to butter you up, but you were a little bit ahead of the curve. And now that the price is up, I mean, it share with our viewer, like how long does it take to discover let's say a 100 million ounce silver deposit in the United States?
From concept to discovery, through drilling it out, through shovels in the ground, you know, is somewhere on average of, from the time you make that first discovery, it was somewhere on average of 10 to 15 years. But getting to the discovery can take 10 to 15 years as well, all other things being equal. And I'm just throwing numbers at you. So from our perspective, between our 3 projects, we're sitting on almost 250 million silver equivalent ounces between silver and gold and some other critical minerals that, hey, look, you know, I can count the number of really good silver deposits in the United States that I would call good based on my experience, that aren't in the hands of a major mining company, you know, almost on one hand. And we've got 3 of them. So yeah, we do have a little bit of a head start. That's a good way to put it. But we're not just sitting back on that. Like, we're still like pushing forward on all of them as quickly as and as efficiently as we can.
Yeah. And that's what I try to explain to people, because I followed silver very closely for 20 years. And what I learned was, you know, just because the price of silver goes to 50 or 60 or $100 per ounce, or maybe higher, you just can't turn a switch and start producing more silver. It's like a decades long process. And I'll say it again, I think there's very few companies out there, including SILVER47, that kind of had the foresight to get themselves ahead of the curve and to have these deposits now in their hands, so that, you know, what I think will happen in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years is that there's going to be a huge renewed interest in domestic silver.
I completely agree with you. We're starting to see it now, and you know what, like, in the United States, and especially in places like Nevada and Alaska and New Mexico, rural New Mexico, where we work, property rights matter, right? And other places in the world, you know, I don't feel so confident in that, you know, necessarily. And that's something that's just really important to me personally. It's kind of like the cornerstone of a Western society is property rights, right? So, and then we also have to ask ourselves, like, where do we want to get, you know, some of these metals from and our critical minerals from? You know, do we want to get them domestically, where we have the best environmental protections, the best labor standards, and you know, we're putting money back into our own economy from an investment perspective, and creating wealth there, you know, for all levels of many levels of people, from jobs to communities to, you know, to making parts to, you know, services to everything, you know? Or do we want to go and get things from the third world, where it's like there's zero environmental protections, no labor standards, and it's dollars for dictators? You know, so I think it's pretty clear what we should do.
And it's an unreliable, unpredictable source, right? Because regimes can change and they can decide they don't want to provide you with those.
That's the geopolitical, like, nightmare, right? That's right. Like, if supply chains kind of change because one country says, hey, you can't have any more of our gallium, like, what does Lockheed Martin do? You know, like, we can't just turn on a gallium source here, you know, for the defense industry, you know, overnight, right? And I was talking to someone yesterday, because in DC, about the critical minerals, because we do have lots of them. Like, we've got silver is going to be one, zinc, lead, copper, but also some gallium and some antimony maybe on the Alaska project. That, you know, he said, you know, that, like, U.S. defense industries might be 6 to 12 months away from running out of supply.
Wow.
And they're scrambling for these things. Like, where can we get these? Where can we secure supply, just in case the tap gets turned off, you know, from across the Pacific Ocean? And they don't know. They don't know.
Interesting. Let's talk about, I'm sure, one of your favorite subjects, SILVER47. And why don't we start, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing we can start in the north in Alaska and go to the south, all the way down to New Mexico.
Sure.
And literally your company is like the northernest part of the United States, all the way to the southern. And there's another advantage to that as well, which we can talk about later. But I know the Red Mountain project in Alaska just presents an incredible opportunity. So the stage is yours. I'd like to learn about it.
Sure. So yeah, let's start at the Red Mountain project in Alaska. We've got roughly 167 million silver equivalent ounces there at high grade, 333 grams per ton. But it really is a polymetallic, mix of critical minerals. And the only thing that is not a critical mineral in the deposit is gold, which is, I think, a nice little bonus. But we're a silver company, and we focus on the precious metals, and especially silver. And we really like that project because the scale, 167 million ounces is great. It's a great starting point, but also like there's some clear avenues for growth, where they're just growing out around the deposit by taking some drill holes and moving them 100 meters away and drilling a hole again just to increase the footprint. That's worked very well for us so far in the first stages. But also, we've got 40 miles of a rock belt that has all the same rocks that host that original mineralization, and lots of like sniffs of high grade on surface that a geologist has maybe spent one day looking at or something, and not drilled. So those are the types of things that if you think big picture, there's potentially quote unquote company making potential there for something that could be world class. That's part of the fun, is chasing things like that. But based on our experience, based on my experience as a geologist, it like clearly deserves a shot. It's a rare and unique and valuable opportunity that we just finished drilling this past summer with 15 holes, and 8 of them are still pending for assays to put out, and that's typically a good benchmark for investors when that news release comes out. But we're going to be back there next summer with 3 rigs and really aggressively step out and aggressively do exploration.
Wow, it sounds exciting. I know everything I hear about Alaska with the current presidential administration, like things are changing up there, and Alaska is becoming much more, it feels to me, mining friendly. Is that a safe assessment?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've learned working in the United States, even in Canada, like we can take like one state or one province and say, is this good or bad? Well, no matter what the answer is, it really depends on where you are in the state, and right. Because if you take a lot of the cities, it might be more democratic and less supportive of mining. But as soon as you get into rural places, it's more Republican and generally more supportive of mining. So it really does matter. But Alaska, I think, is one of the best places to work. I think it was number 2 ranked in the Fraser Institute to do mining investment, and that's a benchmark study that comes out every year. So it's number 2 in the world. Which was nice to see. And to your comment about the current focus, certainly the current governor is a big focus on mining. Mining is a huge driver of the Alaskan economy, but even in Washington, we see Secretary Burgum, really focusing on places like Alaska, and we see the president even talking about it and visiting. You saw Putin in Anchorage. Like that would have been unheard of in the last administration, that's for sure. How dare we talk to our adversaries, right? How dare we even talk to them? But I guess I digress. And so yeah, we think Alaska is a great place to do business, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work there.
Yeah. And there's, like you said, there's some critical minerals mixed in with that deposit, which it seems like in the last 4 weeks, there's been a renewed focus on this whole need to establish domestic sources of critical minerals.
That's absolutely right. The domestic focus is just so important nowadays, and we want to be one of those sources in due course.
Yeah. Okay, so up in Alaska, we're waiting on some further drill results. Obviously, during the winter months, you can't do a lot of drilling up there. But if we move south, the next project is going to be the Hughes project in Nevada.
Yeah. Yeah, the next one we'll drill will be New Mexico, because we just have a seasonal window to drill there now, which is great. But let's talk about the Hughes project in Nevada. It's named the Hughes project, just interesting history, because it was formerly owned by Howard Hughes back in the late 1960s, early 1970s, when he was living in Las Vegas and had the top 3 floors of, I believe the Sands Hotel, and didn't come out of his own hotel or his, one of the floors for several years. He actually got into resources and mining and owned a bunch of mining properties in Nevada. And I think this was the best one. But didn't really do any real exploration on it. So we've been doing some drilling on it since 2020 in steps. And we have about 44 million ounces of silver equivalent split between silver and gold on the project, with some really good potential to find more. This is the eastern half of the famous Tonopah mining district and its extension. And the Tonopah mining district is like one of the reasons that Nevada is called the Silver State. It's between Tonopah and the Comstock lode. So it's like a great place to look for silver in the Silver State, in the places that gives the name the Silver State.
Yeah.
And we're looking for an extension of the entire district, where we've got 44 million ounces as a start, but that's really just a starting point. In total, there was like something like 175 million ounces mined of silver, and almost 2 million ounces of gold mined between 1900 and 1950 over a 2.5 mile window. Well, we've got a 2.5 mile extension on that window where we're starting to hit some really interesting stuff with, and we've drilled several holes in there, around 10 holes in there. And now we're just looking for the main structures. So we're going to get back there, and once we find that, we think that it's the potential is certainly 100 million ounce target in Nevada, where those ounces are probably going to be very valuable. So we're going to get back there in the wintertime and really test that idea with a series of drill holes and give it the shot that it's always deserved since mining stopped there in like 1950.
Okay. So when they were mining previously, did they get to a point where they hit a fault or something like that, and then they couldn't go? Is that, if I remember?
That's exactly it. So they ran into a fault, and then the old time miners lost the veins on the far side of that fault. Because when you have a fault, it does this. Right. So they didn't have the technology that we have today to really chase the veins in terms of drilling, right? They had to do everything from underground and like just mine their way to it. And you can just imagine like that. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
Even back then.
So when you talk about looking for this extension, it's the continuation of those veins on the other side of that fault. And they're there most likely. They just need to be found at this point.
Well, that's right. And we found some of them.
Right.
And they're high grade, but not the main one yet. So where's the main vein?
The main vein. All right. Well, that'll be exciting. And then if we go further south, we get to Mogollon in New Mexico. Is that
That's right? That's right. And Mogollon in New Mexico is another interesting project. We've got 32 million ounces of silver equivalent drilled there at 367 grams per ton. Again, split between silver and gold. But the thing that is interesting, like I say, it's just a start line. Well, what does that mean? Well, that resource, the 32 million ounces, incompletely covers about 2.5 kilometers, say a mile and a half. Incompletely covers a mile and a half of one vein. There is an additional between 50 and 60 miles of vein. If you add them all up and would put them all together, there would be 50 or 60 additional miles of vein that like aren't explored. And if you go and sample, you can go and sample them at surface, like just walk up to the vein and bang off some rocks and put it in a sample bag and have it assayed, and you get like hundreds to thousands of grams per ton, in across the project, right? Over 5 kilometers by 7 kilometers or something. So we see that as the really big, large upside. And I like to say, like, this is just like those famous Mexican silver vein fields that the Spanish have been mining going back 500 years. Except we're not in Mexico here; we're in the United States.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, when I think about how you're three, and I think of it like the trifecta of great silver projects in the United States.
Yeah.
You have Alaska, you have Nevada, you have New Mexico. Will that geographic dispersity allow you to do work drilling throughout the entire year? Because I know a lot of companies, if they're up in Alaska, that's all they have a window. But I would think that you may have the opportunity to drill year round on all three projects.
Yeah, that's right. So you drill Alaska in the summertime and you get as much done as you can in about 4 months. But we're not really limited, between the two projects in the lower 48 for weather.
Okay.
We have a drilling window in New Mexico that's 6 months long, just based on our permit between September and February. And then in Tonopah, Nevada, central Nevada, we can drill all year round. No problem. You might get a snowstorm in February that, it makes your life difficult for a couple days, but it usually melts pretty quickly. So that's a nice thing, is that there's really good synergies between these projects, and that we can, if we want, we can always be drilling one. And that's more or less the plan. And we're going to be drilling here in New Mexico in roughly 1 month, transition to there in the later part of the winter to Hughes in Nevada, and then transition from there in June of next year straight back to Red Mountain, where we'll have 3 drill rigs and really go hard.
Yeah, and these are 3 exciting projects, right? I mean, I've followed mining for decades now, but these are 3 really exciting projects that you can kind of on their own, standing alone, would be worth looking at, but all within one company with a real top tier management structure. To me, it's a really exciting opportunity, all in the United States, silver in the ground, and at a great value too. I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah, let's hear that, because I have a friend who says he likes to buy dollar bills for a nickel, and so and I found in the and I found that I found over the years in the junior sector that opportunity does present itself from time to time. So
it does, and I've seen it actually many times present itself. So evaluation for us, like, what are we worth in terms of like per ounces in the ground? What are we valued at? And we get about something like 37 cents per ounce in the ground if you relate that back to our market cap. Right. And what that, like, that sounds pretty low. Silver's at like $48, so
that's a good deal. Yeah,
factor. It's a times 100, right? Okay, but okay, right? It's silver in the ground is not silver in your hand, so that's fair. Right. So like, how do we compare to some of our peers and some of the other U.S. And even not U.S. companies? And look, like, there's direct comparisons where some of our peers get, like, instead of 37 cents that we get, like $1.50 to $3, right? Yeah. So right away, that's like, okay, that's a good data point to say that we're undervalued relative to our peers. Okay, fine, but we're not just sitting back and saying, okay, therefore you should own our stock or buy the stock because of that. That's not really fair. Like, we're out aggressively adding value on our projects with the drill bit, and adding ounces with the drill bit with every program throughout the year. And really, our goal is, we are sitting on 250 million silver equivalent ounces, a little less than that now. Our goal is to take this to 1 billion ounces. And we have 2 ways to do that: through additional drilling, which I think is there on our projects. I think it's there based on my personal experience. Yeah. But also through additional M&A. Are there any other potential partners out there with management teams that see things the way that we do, that, when we put together Suma, Silver, and SILVER47, it was like 1 + 1 = 4. Well, we want to continue to do that, and this one has been very successful in the market and has really shown, like, as a proof of concept, this works. So we're kind of looking to advance this and grow multiple ways.
Yeah. How about you're talking about doing drilling down the road? Last I checked, you had around, is it $27 million?
That's correct. Yeah, that we've got approximately $27 million in the bank now. So we're in a great position to go out and continue to deploy that capital to add ounces in the ground. And so far, we've discovered silver on the Suma side. We've discovered silver before we did the merger at like 25 cents an ounce. And I expect that to probably continue going forward, get pretty close to that. And that's a great value proposition, right? When silver's like $48.
I'll take it. And I want to mention too, you said earlier that SILVER47 is undervalued relative to your peers, and I can vouch for that. I'm an old accountant who looks at the numbers, but I think it's also important to note that your peers, a lot of people think, are also undervalued. So there's like a double.
Well, that's true. Rising tides lift all boats.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. What are you most excited about? If we look out, let's say 6 months or a year from now, anything that you're excited about that is on the horizon, goals that you might have for the company?
Yeah, it's general growth through either the drill bit and or M&A. But how do we get there? We're going to relook at our resources at Red Mountain. We have the internal expertise to do that. And then from there, if we like those numbers and we think about current metal prices, we start thinking about economic studies, and then I'll be able to start talking about, how much profit could be made and what the cost will be and what the real value proposition is there. I think that's an important step to take. And I'm always excited about new discoveries. I think our chances for that are very good, and those can always be game changing. So I guess you could say I want it all, and we're gonna work pretty hard to get it.
We're gonna get it all. I want to show our viewer the company website here real quick.
Sure.
And there it is on the screen, Silver47, and it is at silver47.ca. If you want to learn more, there's a great investor presentation you can go through. Galen, is there anything that I forgot to ask you today?
I think we covered a lot, and there's a lot of information here. So thanks very much, Ron.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I do want to disclose to our viewers, I am a shareholder of Silver47. I have been for a long time before this interview today. And I am super excited about the company. It's always great to catch up with you. I think next time we talk, be it in 6 months or a year, it'll be exciting to see what happens with the silver price. But also, I think we'll have a lot of fun developments to talk about with Silver47 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it.